The backstory we've all been waiting for continues. Hey everyone, welcome to Princess of Gay. I'm your host Connie, and today we're here with episode 12 of Bleach, the 1,000-Year Blood War. So, last time we started to finally get the backstory for how Isshin Shiba, Captain Isshin Shiba of the 13 Court Guard squads, met and eventually fell in love with and married and had kids with Masaki Kurosaki of the Quincy. And this, of course, led to just Ichigo, who, is kind of the most overpowered of the big three heroes. I don't even know if he's necessarily the actual strongest based on what they can do and everything, but he has every power system in the fucking anime or manga as well in the series. Where it's Ichigo, it's yeah, he has both Haki and a devil fruit. But it's it's only one devil fruit. It's not like he has every form of devil fruit. And then you have Naruto, who doesn't have every form of jutsu and specialty ability in that verse. Ichigo just has everything. It's so wild. But we're finding out this backstory, and we see that Masaki was actually connected with Uryu's father and the Ishida family in general. And we see that Isshin was the captain of Hitsugaya's squad. Hitsugaya and Rengiku both served under him. So that's really interesting in and of itself. And it seems like Rengiku is actually primed to take over, more by her feats and everything. But Isshin believed that Hitsugaya would actually be the one to become captain out of the two of them. And he was right, mind you. So it ended up working out exactly as he figured. Now, we know that she ends up sacrificing herself to save Ichigo from Grand Fisher. I'm just wondering, did he leave the Soul Society? He had to have left before that happened. And I'm wondering if him leaving was due to the fact that he ended up marrying Quincy. Did they find out and did they kick him out? Or was there some other, or did he leave on his own will? Maybe he just abandoned the Soul Society. I'm sure we're going to get those answers. But as a little fun note, this is our first series reaction back after I spent this last weekend at Ishokan. As you can see, I got the shirt right here. And at Ishokan, I met AJ Beckles, who is not only the voice of Okarun in Dandadan and Michael Olay in Gentry Chow versus the Underworld, but he's also Kaname Tozen in Bleach 1,000-Year Blood War, who we just saw last episode. Tozen made a return to the series alongside Gin Ichimaru and, of course, Aizen. Though Aizen was in a previous episode in the current day, this showed him during the flashback times when he was setting up and planning for everything he was going to eventually do when betraying the Soul Society, alongside, Tozen and Ichimaru. And so we got to see kind of the starts of that, and even seeing a hollow that was fighting like a Soul Reaper, implied to have been a Soul Reaper prior, and was an experiment of our bad guys. So yeah, a lot of crazy shit had been going down during this time. This was 16 years in the past, 16, 17 years in the past. Because Ichigo is 15 at the start of the series. At this point, he might be 16, though. I don't know exactly how much time has passed. I know that there is actually a time like passage in the series. I just don't know exactly how long it is. But he's definitely older than when he started. Either way, it's been a good amount of time. So it's like this could be even upwards of 20 years in the past for all we know. Um, it's hard to exactly say. The point is some some anime when we get like a flashback backstory moment, it's usually a lot further back. Um, but in shows like this or Naruto and One Piece, the big three, we get flashbacks to not really that long ago, all things considered. With Naruto, it's like we get stuff like right before he was born or right after he was born with his parents and everything. With One Piece, we get the Gold Roger flashbacks, which happened like 25 years ago, I believe it is. And so it's like they're not all together that long ago that some of these flashbacks happen. It's not like I don't know, Dr. Stone came to mind. Let's go with that. Where it's like all the flashbacks from the world before take place literally thousands of years in the past. But to be fair, that's also because of the events of Dr. Stone and what that's about. Also, I need to get back to Dr. Stone. Just saying. We did the first season, and I haven't reacted to anything beyond that yet, so we do need to get back to that. Um, but focused on this, yeah, I'm just excited to see where this goes at this point. There's so much opportunity for so many great moments and all, and we can tell where this part of the series is ending. I guess you could call it season. It makes it easier. This season of Thousand Year Blood War, this core is technically the correct term, but yeah, this is definitely going to end these first 13 episodes with Ichigo like coming to realize exactly what he needs to about his past through all of this, and probably going back to the Soul Society and getting his Zanpakuto um, reforged by Sword God. I still do not remember his name, and I probably won't unless it keeps like drilling it into my head over and over. I'm bad with that sometimes. It's always kind of a shot in the air of whether or not I'm going to be good or bad with a name. Sometimes it's like, oh, I remember a name actually surprisingly easily. And then other times it's like, I could not tell you this character's name for the life of me. One Piece is actually one of those I remember names super easily with, and I don't know why. But anyway, anyway. I'm very excited to see what happens next in this backstory and exactly how far we're going to go in this episode specifically. Because we have this episode and next episode. So are we going to get to the end of the flashback in this episode and then episode 13 is going to be like the aftermath with what Ichigo does, or are we going to finish the flashback in at the beginning of episode 13? I guess we'll find out. But let's get going into episode 12 and see what we have in store. Hold up just a second there. Before you click that link down in the description below to go to today's reaction, I just wanted to take this moment real quick to remind you of all the awesome content we have on the channel. Between Monday and Friday, we have a plethora of awesome series reactions, with 2 on Wednesday. We also have movie reactions every Saturday and Sunday. I do pre-record them during the week, but upload them on the weekend. And don't forget about all the awesome gaming content over on the Princess of Gaming channel. Every single day of the week, we have some awesome Let's Plays for you. A bunch of different things to check out, and more coming in the future. And don't forget to click that subscribe button or like the video if you really enjoy the content I'm putting out. There will be more to come in the future. In the meantime, thank you so much for tuning in, and let's get this going. And we are back, and we'll begin with spoilers in 3, 2, 1, now. So both prior to this episode, and obviously during the episode as you saw, there were questions that I had. There was a lot of things I was wondering, a lot of things I was unclear about, and I was hoping that this backstory would start to continue to answer. And by the end of the episode, we definitely got those answers and more. There's there's a huge amount of information here that really just really shows the moral character of Ishin, and shows a lot of like just how everything came to be where it is now. Now, there's a couple questions I have after this as well, some new questions. I don't know how long it's going to take for those to get answered, but the big one right off the bat is, so Ishin gave up being a Soul Reaper, and he went into the Gigai and everything, and it happened pretty much instantly, right? At that moment. He didn't get a chance to go back to the Soul Society to explain everything, to express what happened, and talk to Head Captain Yamamoto at that point or anything. I assume they know what happened. But what is their thoughts on all of that? Because he just, like, abandoned all of that, like, in an instant. He, again, never went back or anything. Did they ever come down to talk to him? Or did they just kind of, like, ignore his existence from that point on because of him choosing to help a Quincy? I'm genuinely curious about that. And does like Hitsugaya and Rangiku, do they know, for example, what happened to their captain? Because when they met Ichigo and everything, it's like they knew him as Ichigo Kurosaki. Because they knew him under his mother's name, because Ishin took her name, and Ichigo has her name. So, and I assume they probably don't know who she was, so... do they even know that Ichigo is Ishin's son? No, but haven't they met Ishin? Because they've come to Karakura, right? Again, like I said in the reaction, it's been a long ass time, over a decade since I've watched most of the original series. So it's like I don't remember everything, or if it actually discussed that prior. I don't remember. I feel like that would have been a really big deal though, because they've come to the human world and they've like interacted with Ichigo's family and stuff, right? I believe for sure they've interacted with Karin and Yuzu, and with Ichigo and Orihime's friends and stuff like Tatsuki and Keigo and whatnot, who I don't think we've seen, by the way, this no, we haven't seen any of them this season. Um, but yeah, it's like, huh. It's just interesting to think about. Because I feel like they would have had to have seen him, and if they did, they absolutely would have recognized him. And he would have recognized them right back. I'm really not sure about that now. I'm gonna have to see if I can look that up. But yeah, that's probably my biggest question coming off of this episode. But like obviously going into this, I mentioned the entire thing early on when we paused it to talk about it. The entire thing about the age difference, and yeah, we see that they kind of were bonded because of necessity, because of her being entered into that hollowification, due to the fight with Aizen's hollow, artificially created hollow and everything. And we see that it was literally the only way to save her life to bond them together, and Ryuken obviously was fucked up by that. He ended up getting together with his maid though, which was like obvious that that was going to be Uru's mother at that point. there was kind of a visible obviousness too, because she kind of looks a little bit like Uryu, or rather, I guess Uryu looks like a blend of his parents. But this absolutely explains why Ryukin is an asshole. And don't get me wrong, that doesn't make him being an asshole good or right. It just makes it understandable. It explains his assholery, but doesn't excuse it, you know? Um, so yeah, that's really interesting in its own right. That Uru's father just kind of like got really fucked up by this entire situation because he clearly cared greatly for Masaki. And after she graduated, she was basically banished from the Quincy. And it even got to a point where it's just like he just had to abandon his connections to her altogether. So yeah, it's pretty wild. It's pretty wild. Um, I like seeing Urahara's connection to all of this because that was definitely teased last episode, and yeah, it makes sense as well that he would be the one to be able to save her with obviously Ishin's help and everything, but the one who would have the technology and everything to create a Gigai like that would cause this to happen. And this also explains like why Ishin was able to become a Soul Reaper again after that point. Because after he lost all his powers and even ability to see spirits and all, it's like he didn't lose his memories. He remembered all of that the entire time. But it's just when all of that was broken, when that connection was broken because of Ichigo's hollow spirit being unleashed and everything that he had inherited from his mother. So Ishin was able to become a Soul Reaper again at that point, and it's just okay. We're getting really big answers with that, and even we find out why she died because apparently she was extremely skilled in her defensive abilities. As Ishin said, like she could have easily defeated Grant Fisher because this was something else I wondered. Like, if she was like probably very skilled, how would Grant Fisher, who we knew at the time was not that strong, how would he have been able to kill her? My thought going in was that, she just focused so much more on defending Ichigo that she kind of let her guard slip, but that was not the case. Although she was defending Ichigo, she could have still guarded against anything he could have done and taken him out with ease. The reality of the situation is that her powers just disappeared because they were stolen by Yuhabaha. It was right at that time where he was, coming back and regaining power, the 9 years and everything. And he was regaining his power by stealing power from still existing Quincy, who he deemed unworthy, who he deemed to be like, failures of Quincy, basically. He stole their power, and that included Misaki, which allowed him to rise back up to power. Because he is the originator of the Quincy. Like I compared it to him being like Adam from biblical stories and everything, Adam and Eve and all that. How in the biblical tales, Adam is the first man. Every single human spawned from him. Because you even have like Eve, who is created from his rib. The only exception I think is if you go with the entire story of Lilith, like Adam and Lilith, her being predating Eve and being created separately, not as like from his rib. So that would be the only exception, but that's like not in most biblical tales and versions and all. So that's a completely separate thing. But it's like Adam is the originator. Even Eve originated from him, and then all of humanity spawned from that, from their children and everything. Um, there's a lot of just craziness from there, but you get the point. And so it seems to be kind of the same situation. Yuha Baha was the originator of the Quincy. He was the first one, and every single Quincy spawned from him. He like calls Ichigo like his son and everything, and it's kind of true in that kind of regard, but it's like he's more his descendant, just way down the line. But because of Yuha Baha's abilities and strengths and powers and everything, he's able to keep coming back or whatever, able to keep existing and whatnot. Stealing life or power or whatever from other Quincy's or just others in general, maybe Hollows even. And he just persists. So yeah, it's crazy in that regard. He's so powerful, he's able to come back despite, having originated the entire group, the entirety of the Quincy. It's insane. But yeah, so it's entirely his fault that Masaki died. He is entirely at fault for that. He wasn't the one who directly killed her, but she would not have died if he hadn't taken the power. It is like 100% on him. So that's going to give Ichigo definitely a lot more reason to, fight and take down Yuha Baha for good. Don't know how that's going to happen, but it's definitely going to happen somehow. Of course, again, with Ichigo having like every power system in this universe. It's like, let's see, he's a Soul Reaper, he's a Quincy, he's a Visored, he's a Fullbringer, he's everything. It's going to be interesting to see how this all comes to a head. But it's definitely given him a different outlook on everything now that he knows all of this history. And I like, by the way, going back to Ishin and Misaki, that their romance didn't actually start when she was in high school. That it actually started after she was already in college and everything. Prior to that, they were just kind of friends, and they had bonded because, again, literal necessity. Their souls were literally bonded because they had to be in order for her to stay alive. But it's like some people would still find it weird, and it's still a little weird, but at least the romance and the relationship didn't start till after. That's my, resolve with this, is that I'm just glad that they never actually started any kind of romance prior to that. Because it would otherwise be very weird. And again, it's fiction, I understand that, but it's like even certain things in fiction, it's like it'll still bother me. Some things I can get over, some things I can't. It just depends on what it is, and that kind of stuff is usually something I can't. Unless it's expressed and explained and handled in a good manner like this. But also, yeah, like 3 years have now passed since Ichigo first got his Soul Reaper powers from Rukia. So that's really interesting in and of itself. Because the thing is, Ichigo's Soul Reaper powers do come from Rukia. They don't come from Ishin, because when he was born, and Kareen and Yuzu as well, it's like he was born of the Gigai, of his father's Gigai form, which is completely void of all Soul Reaper powers. He has no Soul Reaper in him from birth. He has his mother's Quincy powers naturally in him, though. Those are there. That's natural. That exists naturally, as does the hollow part from her. he inherited that as well. Yuzu and Kareen, I don't think inherited anything, which is interesting. Um, but the Soul Reaper stuff comes entirely from Rukia. I don't know if we 100% knew that before, probably did, but this really confirms that he got none of that from his father. I always kind of assumed that he had it deep inside because of his father, but it was just more kind of unlocked thanks to Rukia. But no, that's not the case. That's pretty blatantly said here. So, yeah, that clarified that for me big time as well. I also like how it explained why he opened up the clinic, that it was specifically tied to because he had taken this training and studying in terms of medical stuff while in the Soul Society. So it makes sense that he would open a clinic. It's something he could do as just like a good cover and everything. It explains everything super well here. We get so much of this backstory and all. The only thing I'm wondering is why Yuzu and Kareen didn't get anything. The only exception being Kareen having some spiritual awareness. And honestly, it's not even that much. Kareen has like kind of low level spiritual awareness, and it's definitely like a part of her character, but it's never like gotten to a point where it's a big deal, right? So it's like, why did she inherit so little? Why did Yuzu inherit pretty much nothing? Just random chance? I don't know. I don't know. But it is really fascinating. It is really fascinating. And you know what's also really interesting is that because of the origination of the Quincy from Yuhabaha, pretty much all Quincy are inherently related. Which also kind of makes the fact that Ryukin marrying was going to marry Masaki and everything, it makes it a little weird. I mean, I know it's like super far down the line, so it's like they're technically they all come from the same origin point, but they're not related in that regard. I know, I understand, but it means that there's like kind of a deeper connection between Ichigo and Uryu as well. And I wonder if that's going to be explored. Because Ichigo knows this now, but Uryu, I don't know if he does. Like, he was reading some stuff before, but we haven't really gone too much into that. I'm very curious about that, especially if Uryu does infiltrate the Vandenreich, which I definitely still think he's going to do. I'm very curious how that would turn out. Because the thing is, we already saw that Ichigo very much trusts him. Like, they're still rivals and everything. They still, like, argue and bicker. But they're friends. They are 100% friends by this point, and they trust each other greatly. So if Uryu did, like, go to the Vandenreich and Ichigo, like, found out about it and all, I feel like Ichigo would understand. Like, that Uryu was doing something here. I don't think he would think Uryu was betraying them. Ichigo's smarter than that. I really do believe he is. But I'm just really curious how that would go down, and I really want to actually see that. But yeah, knowing this now, it's interesting too, because he got his Zanpakuto in an unnatural way. So now that he knows his history and all, how is this going to help him, like, reforge his Zanpakuto? Is he going to, like, now that he knows who he is, where he comes from, everything, he's going to be able to, like, not necessarily reforge the Zanpakuto he had before, but, like, kind of forge a new one? Or a new version of Zangetsu? How is that going to work? Because the spirit of the Zanpakuto is kind of like an offshoot of your own spirit. So that's really curious in and of itself. I wonder if, like, I wonder if now that he knows more about like his spirit, about everything like that, if that's going to like make his new Zanpakuto or new reforged Zanpakuto or whatever you want to call it, if that's going to make it stronger because he now has a better understanding of his soul. I assume that has to be it. I assume that's why Sword God sent him back and everything. I'm also interested to know, does Ishin know Squad Zero? Because Sword God sent him to his father's clinic, to home and everything. Like very very specifically dropped him off there, right? Like I can believe that Squad Zero knows who Ishin is, but does Ishin know who they are? Because Ishin was ready. He was ready to give this talk. So I'm just really curious about all of this. I am so goddamn curious. There's so much, again, there's so much that was answered here, so many big questions, so much clarification on things, as well as answers to questions I didn't even really have. But it does raise more questions. It does open up new possibilities, and it makes me wonder about more stuff. And I like that. I mean, and on top of it, it's so entertainingly fascinating that I'm just so actively invested in this. I think I mentioned in a previous episode for this core that um, I've become just as invested in this now as I was at like the peak of my investment in the original Bleach back in the day. Like my peak investment in this series as a whole has returned after so goddamn long. It's hell in some ways even become greater because I'm obviously a very different person than I was over 10 years ago. I'm in a very different place than I was, and I appreciate certain things with anime and a lot of that than I did back then. So there's a lot more that I really love about this. That if I were like 23 years old again, or actually it'd probably be more like 2021 years back when this first ended. Um, it was 3 years ago that this started, right? That Thousand Year Blood Wars first started because it was 2022, right? So if that was 3 years ago, then I would have been 30, or I would have been 20 when the original series ended. But yeah, it's like I was a very different person at 20 years old. That was before I was out. I wasn't even out as a trans girl at that point. I was still in the closet. So that shows you alone how very different I was. Um, but like at the peak of my love for the original Bleach, I was like super into it. I mean, it was never quite the same peaks as I got with One Piece, but it was definitely higher than I ever was with Naruto. Because I was a big fan of Naruto for a good amount of time too. I really love Naruto. But Naruto eventually kind of faded for me, and Bleach's peaks were again greater than Naruto's for me. One Piece's were definitely the biggest though. I was always a massive One Piece fan. But when Bleach like was like really at the top of its game for me, I would probably say was when they were invading the Soul Society and everything, and then the Waco Mundo stuff. That was probably the peaks for Bleach for me back in the day. Um, but I would say like this is I think greater peaks than back then. This is already just so much more interesting, so much more fascinating. The writing just feels better. Obviously the animation's better, but that's expected. Over 10 years of a gap, that's expected. Not that the animation was bad in the original, it wasn't. But still. it's just, it feels like I'm a kid again, almost discovering something new for the first time. And it's like, this is the kind of excitement I get when I, even nowadays, discover something new that really hypes me up. Um, and I wouldn't say like this is even the peak of that, though. I mean, like, my hype for like Link Click is higher than this. But this is still really damn good. And I'm super invested to see what happens next. But we only have one episode left in this core. Now, like I've said, and I'll bring this up next week as well, we are taking a break between the cores. We're not going to do each core or season of the Thousand Year Blood War back to back, just because I like to kind of take breaks so I don't get overwhelmed, so I don't start to feel like I'm too just bored with the series. Basically, I want to be able to keep my hype up for a show, and for me, that basically means taking breaks every now and again. It's basically the same reason why I don't like binging stuff for the most part, because binging for me, it's like it ruins my experience. My experience is heightened greatly by having breaks, by having time to think about things, by having time to, like, really contemplate what happens in a series. That's why I react week to week on these shows. I don't like record all of these episodes like back to back in a single day. I record them a week apart between episodes because I get time that way to think about things and to really take everything in. It makes for the best viewing experience in my eyes. And it allows me to truly appreciate the show in a way that I couldn't if I binged it. And this goes for every show, not just Bleach. Um, but part of that also means, like, in between, for any show, including this, in between seasons, or in this case, cores, I want to take a break so that I don't get to the point where I might not be as interested. It's like, oh, I'm going to get overwhelmed. I'm going to get, like, kind of bored of it. It's going to start losing its luster for me. So to stop that from happening, I'll take a little break here. I'll watch some other stuff in the meantime, come back to it just as hyped, just as excited as ever, if not more, because I took that time off and I'm ready to get back to it. So, yeah, we're going to take a break after episode 13 before we move on to the next core. And I'm excited to see how this closes. I assume it's just going to be with, like, Ichigo going back to the Soul Society, reconvening with Sword God, getting a new Zanbakuto, or new version of Zangetsu. Something like that. But I guess we're going to have to find out next time. So thank you all so much for tuning in. As always, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so let me know in the comments below what you thought of this episode, but no spoilers, please. Very explicitly, do not spoil me. I may know one or two things, like, going forward and everything, but I don't even have context for the stuff that I know, so please, no spoilers. But all of that being said, thank you all so much, as always, for tuning in. And for now, I'm Connie, and I'm signing off. See y'all next time.